Welcome back to this series dissecting Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. This is part 5, and I hope by the end of this video we can get the hell off discount Yavin 4, since we've already been here for 2 bloody videos. Once you're finished here, you can go back and watch parts 1 through 4, as you can see here. I will link these videos below, and you can find the playlist on my channel. All of the previous videos, as well as future videos from this series, will be in there, and you can watch them at your leisure. Now, before we progress, there is something I forgot to touch on concerning Meriadoc, Esquire of Abrams. When he says dark signs, cloning, secrets only the Sith knew. First off, what dark signs are you talking about? We, as the audience, haven't seen any dark signs up till this point. Damn it, this has off-screen's grubby hands all over it. He's probably the only free agent in Hollywood that gets paid more than the bloody Rock. Anyway, Mary then says cloning is a secret only the Sith knew? What the hell? I'm pretty sure cloning is a phenomenon achievable with simple science. Matter of fact, mankind in 2020 has the scientific capability to clone sheep. There's a Star Wars episode with clones in the bloody title. This is not a secret that only the Sith knew. Pretty sure cloning was scarce throughout the galaxy, but there were still factions and species that performed it. Dexter talks about the Kaminoans as cloners, as if it's a well-known occupation.
Kaminoans keep to themselves. They're cloners. Damn good ones too.
Sure, Kaminoans were cloning specialists, but nowhere in all of Star Wars has cloning been referenced as exclusively for the Sith, nor has it been referenced as solely a dark side act. Just because the Sith funded the clone army doesn't mean this either. The Jedi were happy to receive the assistance of the clones. Granted, they were approved of by the Senate, but there was no such disdain for the clone troopers on the part of the Jedi, at least before Order 66 was carried out. Not to mention the Sith is an ancient term that, in my understanding, is used to define Force users who've fallen or embraced the dark side. Now, the Phantom Menace outlined that the Sith had been gone for a millennium, 1,000 years. That's enough for something to fall into legend or mythology. So after 30 years, Rey thinks that the Jedi were a myth, but after 1,000 plus years, everyone just acknowledges the Sith are a thing? What the fuck? Maz Kanata knew about the Sith because she's over 1,000 years old. She's seen the Old Republic, the Fall of the Republic, the Rise of the Empire, the Fall of the Jedi, the Rebellion, the Fall of the Empire, the Return of the Jedi, and the Rise of the First Order. She has lived through it all. So it makes sense that she would know who or what the Sith are. Again, why are characters being put front and center when it's inappropriate to do so, but then being tucked away when it is very appropriate for them to be front and center? To repeat myself from the last video, Rose asks Rey if we believe that Palpatine's return is true, when she should have asked Leia, since she was alive at the head of the rebellion at the time of Palpatine's death. And instead of having Maz Kanata reference the Sith, you have Mary from Lord of the Rings do it?
You're not making any sense at all.
Anyway, moving on. We left off with Rey telling Leia that she must go. She must go finish what Luke started. I'll pretend I didn't hear that for a second time. Otherwise, we're going to be here for literally forever. Rey preps the Falcon for takeoff, despite the bloody thing being on fire not 5 minutes ago, but now it's brand spanking new like she just flew the ship through a spanner. Anyway, as she's preparing to leave, predictably, she is confronted by Poe and Finn, insisting that they all go together. This journey is a testament to their friendship. It's all of them or none of them. They must go too. All of our wonderful heroes shall stick by one another to the end, no matter what. Rey initially insists it's too dangerous, but Finn then again tells her plainly, we go together. And Rey reluctantly agrees, with a tiny smile of gratitude on her face. And I couldn't suspend my disbelief at how literally copy and pasted this is from Return of the King.
This time you must stay, Gimli.
Have you learned nothing of the stubbornness of dwarves?
Might as well accept it. We're going with you, laddie.
Look, it's enjoyable to see characters come together like this, but the point I'm trying to make is that the style of which it's portrayed has been taken from somewhere else. And in addition to that, the characters haven't earned this moment of coming together. The trio up until this very moment in the trilogy, the entire trilogy, have only shared one 60-second scene with each other, as a collective. And now Disney is trying to paint this as the equivalent of Han, Luke, and Leia's final adventure? Fuck off. Now then, we get a montage of characters saying their heartfelt farewells to each other. This may come across as an unpopular opinion, but hear me out. Finn asks Rose Tico to come along for the journey, and predictably, not to mention in the inclusion of the leaks, JJ cooks up a reason why Rose is unable to join the protagonist this time. This is undoubtedly in response to the overwhelmingly poor reception the character, not the actress, but the character received by the general audience from the way she was written in The Last Jedi. Rose tells Finn, "The General asked me to study the specs of old destroyers so we can stop the fleet if you find it." I like the interaction here between the two. Finn asks her if, encouraging her to be positive. Like, what do you mean, if? And Rose corrects her words, telling him when. And Finn mirrors her response, giving her a platonic shoulder grab. I bought the friendship between these two in this small scene. They met in The Last Jedi and have remained close since, but I can't help but feel we lost some potential here. I am not an advocate for The Last Jedi, nor am I an advocate for the proposed romance between Finn and Rose. But I am somewhat of an advocate for Rose Tico, to be perfectly honest. And I've said this numerous times in other videos. I like what Rian was going for with Rose's character, and I think that had she not been written so terribly, which I could go in depth on in a myriad of different ways, had she been written more competently, I could see a character such as herself mesh quite well into Star Wars, as part of the ensemble cast. I don't disagree that writing her out of the story for the majority of the film was certainly the safe thing to do, despite the fact that Rose doesn't need to study the specs of old destroyers, since the Rebels have been destroying those machines for decades now. Writing her out of the story makes meta sense, but not narrative sense. And I was actually curious to see what JJ would have written for Rose had she tagged along for the main story. Perhaps it could have validated the potential I saw in her character. Like I said, it feels like wasted potential. But I can absolutely see how many people would think this was a good decision. To each their own, but the excuse they gave for writing her out was bullshit, and we know it. Then it cuts to Rey just staring at nothing, as we can see here, but then it closes up on her face, and her expression suggests that she's looking at something. But we can't see what it is. And then Poe asks her exactly what we're all wondering, and Rey tells him, nothing. It's nothing. This kind of scene is extremely cliche.
Hey, Happy. Nice jacket. Who are you waving at, Happy? Nobody, Grandma. Let's go home.
However, the problem is that it's utterly pointless in this movie. We never find out the context for this, and if you think this is setting up the ending where she sees both the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia, well, Leia is still alive at this point in the movie, so she's not an apparition yet, and Rey sees Luke on Ahch-To later, and she's surprised as hell. The scene plays out like it's their first interaction since The Last Jedi. So unless she's looking at Yoda, I have absolutely no idea what this is supposed to imply. Not to mention, in Disney canon, Force ghosts can interact with the physical world, meaning that they aren't just inside people's heads. Other people should be able to see them, meaning Poe should have been able to see who she's looking at, but he sees nothing. My point is, why have this in the movie at all? It serves no purpose. Maybe it's simply Rey just marveling at the greenery one more time since she knows she's heading off to discount Tatooine, and in The Force Awakens she makes a comment about how much she loves the lush green landscapes, after having grown up on Jakku, another bloody desert planet where there was essentially no greenery at all.
I didn't know there was this much green in the whole galaxy.
So it's possible that's all it was. And if so, that's actually a pretty nice callback, but again, then why did Poe ask her what she was looking at, as if to imply something? If you wanted to accomplish the same thing, maybe just have Rey looking at the greenery by herself, alone in the forest, brushing her fingers against the grass and the damp soil to revel in her surroundings one more time. Anyway, let's move on. The only pair that nudged my heartstrings a tiny bit in this montage was the C-3PO R2-D2 farewell, basically acknowledging how much one means to the other over their long journey that spans the entire 9-episode saga, but that 3PO only has memory of since after episode 3. This is to butter the audience up for 3PO's sacrifice letter, which turns out to be pointless anyway, and we will get to that, rest assured, but I still felt something while seeing these two part ways. And then it cuts to a very funny scene where Rey farewells Leia as if she's seeing her for the last time. There is no urgency that I felt throughout all of this. It is abundantly clear that this is very much Daisy Ridley being told to act as if she's farewelling the real Carrie Fisher, who has been deceased for some time up until this point. It's like the film acknowledges that this is Rey's last scene with Leia because of the meta, and because there's no authentic urgency for the audience to care, this interaction fell very flat for me. It literally comes out of nowhere and it doesn't fit at all. Rey starts tearing up, And she says, there's so much I want to tell you. And then Leia is like, tell me when you get back. And based on what we've discussed in previous videos, why do I feel like that line was meant for Han Solo? That's probably because it was, but they just refitted it for Rey. Rey's even stealing Han's lines now. Anyway, Rey, you've been training under Leia for supposedly a year. Spent more time with her than presumably anyone in that time span. How the hell haven't you said everything you needed to say already? What is it you haven't said to her by this point? I understand giving her a good luck hug, but the scene plays out very much like farewelling someone who is going to die or someone who is already dead. I'd actually get behind this scene a lot more if it was Leia who was the one who was scared for Rey, since Rey is the one venturing out into the unknown. But Leia in this story couldn't be safer where she is. She's in the heart of the Resistance base on an unknown planet away from the First Order. Why is Rey the one getting emotional? Again, because JJ needs every advantage he can get to make the audience emotional.
Do not take me for some conjurer of cheap tricks.
Not to mention Leia gives her Luke's lightsaber, bestowing it upon her with her blessing. So I guess she doesn't need to earn that saber after all. And now Disney is hoping the audience will be like, yeah, well, Leia thinks she should have it, so stop asking questions. See, she doesn't need training. Leia says it's okay. She doesn't need to earn things. What are you, crazy? That's not how Jedi training works. That's not even how real life works. People don't earn things, they're just given them. What a message for young impressionable children to take from the Disney trilogy. Really prepping them for real life, aren't ya? I'd advise parents to show their kids 1998's Mulan if they want a female heroine who earns her recognition and kicks a ton of ass at the same time. Leia then tells Rey, who gives her an emotional hug, to quote, never be afraid of who you are. Why would she be afraid? As it stands right now, she's a nobody, right? Thanks, Ryan, by the way. Go fuck yourself. But yeah, this is used so that JJ can deliver the Palpatine retcon later in the movie. At least there's some kind of payoff. But again, this line kind of came out of nowhere. Not to mention, Leia said this in unused footage of The Force Awakens, right? So I guess Rey was never meant to be a no one after all, if this line was originally meant for her back in 2015. Anyway, moving on. Our iconic trio plus Chewbacca, 3PO and BB-8 leave Discount Jango 4 and are off to save the universe. Thank God, we can finally get to the next sequence. We link up with Kylo Ren surrounded by masked figures as he observes the reforging of his iconic helmet. Remember guys? Remember when Kylo was actually good? Very derivative, but good nonetheless. Anyway, he's having his mask, his exact same mask that he destroyed with his own hands, repaired in a not so subtle, completely ludicrous, but also satisfying middle finger from J.J. Abrams to this guy. I acknowledge that this is absolute bullshit. The pieces of Kylo's mask were back on the random elevator in the middle of the Supremacy, and if the janitor didn't sweep up the remains and toss them into the trash compactor, that ship was blown to hell by the Holdo maneuver. But instead, the pieces have been collected, reassembled, and now here they are. The mask is here, with cracks showing that this is indeed the same mask that was broken and now it is fixed. It is not a new mask, Ryan. It is the same one you destroyed. Just to be clear. Now, if only we could fix other things as well. Anyway, once Kylo got his own mask back, which, question, if a whole year has passed, why is Kylo only now getting his mask back? Did he just decide to make that decision the same time Rey decides to leave Discount Yavin 4 and look for the Sith Wayfinders? Because that just seems like a very convenient timing, is all. Anyway, some weird creature reforges the sword, he reforges the mask, and then Kylo sets off with his masked henchman back to his personal Star Destroyer. He storms through the corridors, no pun intended, and passes by two stormtroopers who look on casually as the masked men pass by. And just so it's absolutely clear that JJ has ticked this box, these stormtroopers just blurt out,
Knights of Ren.
Okay, JJ, we get it. They're in the movie somehow. They weren't just some mystery box, clickbait, theory-generating idea that you and Lucasfilm just kind of forgot about. And now we know for sure that you want us to stop whinging about it. Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't work like that. We will get back to the Knights of Ren soon, but holy hell, what a blunt and forced way to introduce them into the film. They're just here now. Why weren't they in the opening battle on Mustafar? And if they were there, why were they having a beer with off-screen? And just so there's no speculation, and to drive the point home, once again, someone has to spell it out for us. Yes, sometimes that is necessary to inform the audience, but in this case, the introduction to these masked figures makes their identity so obvious, so much in fact that telling us seems like a formality. The audience could have pieced it together themselves. Kylo walks into a meeting with his council and places the extremely fake prop head of the informant from the iSpace squarely on the table to intimidate his staff and assert his authority as supreme leader. He tells his council they have a spy in their ranks, who just sent a message to the resistance, as a mysterious new face scrutinizes General Hux, who stares right back at him in order to keep the audience guessing. But in retrospect, this is to hint at one of them being the traitor. I'll get back to this down the line, but for now let's continue with this scene. Kylo Ren says, "With what I saw on Exegol, the First Order is about to become a true empire." Oh, fuck off, JJ. You blew your load with that insinuation back in The Force Awakens. Kylo then asks Hux why he feels so uneasy about his appearance, given that Hux is probably the only person in the First Order who at this point was alive to see him while he wore his mask. I figured that, wouldn't it be everyone else who felt uneasy about him wearing it suddenly? I figured Hux would feel amused if anything, like, really? This again, Ren? Okay, suit yourself. But Hux is the one feeling uneasy, and this is all to tease the upcoming face turn. Hux is the one who feels uneasy. Hux is the one with unrest. But General Hux simply responds with, "The mask? No, sir." Now, if Hux was feeling uneasy, it shouldn't be because of the mask, but rather how Kylo has emasculated him publicly once Snoke was killed, in front of his very own men. Then a random First Order officer raises a very valid point, that is, what are these allies on Exegol? This cult of conjurers and soothsayers. Which is a valid point of, hey dude, an entirely new and more powerful fleet just fell into your lap. Doesn't that sound too good to be true? Think about this. Only to be interrupted by the introduction of a new character who always talks in an aggressive, assertive, and menacing voice. Allegiant General Enric Pride, who tries to shut down the officer's concerns, saying that this cult has conjured legions of Star Destroyers, and that the Sith fleet will increase their resources 10,000-fold. Whoa, hang on. So firstly, this sounds a bit odd. Why does Pride need to tell this officer how much resources the Sith have? Shouldn't he already know just how big the fleet is? I also find it odd he would use the term 10,000-fold. When he said that, it made it quite clear to me that Pride was speaking primarily to the audience, not the officer. Did no one else find it weird when he used that specific term? Usually you would hear the term 10-fold or 100-fold as an expression to inform someone of an increase, and at scale. 10,000-fold sounds oddly specific, but that nitpick aside, you're telling me that the quote final order are going to increase your resources, presumably Star Destroyers and ships, in your current arsenal by a multiple of 10,000. Guys, you realize this doesn't mean the final order have 10,000 Star Destroyers, which is an already absurd number, but they have 10,000 times the number of Star Destroyers and ships as the First Order currently possesses. And assuming the First Order have somewhere between 100 and 200 Star Destroyers, that means the Final Order has between 100,000 and 200,000 Star Destroyers. What the actual fuck, JJ? That is beyond ludicrous. Your only way of raising the stakes is to copy-paste and slap a bigger number on things, is that it?
Do not take me for some conjurer of cheap tricks.
Well, sorry to disappoint you, but it fails. Another officer then chimes in and says they need to increase recruitments and capture more of the galaxy's young. Yeah, what's a few 100,000 kidnappings, right? Sounds like a day at the beach. Not to mention, if you're going to blow up all of the planets in the galaxy with those Star Destroyer weapons, then recruits are going to be hard to come by, especially if they're dead. Then the previous officer who raised concerns insists that they need to be more cautious regarding the Sith fleet. He says, what is this fleet? A gift? What is he, the Emperor, asking for in return? This is an excellent question, and this random officer has just shown more competence than the entire First Order since the opening of The Force Awakens. He should get a promotion, but what does he get instead? Well, Kylo uses Force Choke and crushes him against the ceiling for daring to have a brain. In other words, JJ is very bluntly telling the audience what he thinks about their own intelligence and is telling us to stop asking questions, while simultaneously turning Kylo into a gigantic fucking idiot, if he wasn't already. Kylo then aggressively approaches the table and tells his officers to crush any worlds that oppose them. He also says, my knights and I are going hunting for the scavenger. Okay, well, there you go, folks. As I said previously, those 2 corridor troopers didn't need to spell out the Knights of Ren to us. Not only could we have figured it out on our own regardless, but Kylo also referenced them as his personal knights just seconds later. This movie is just so fucking stupid. Not only that, but he references Rey as the scavenger, and how exactly would his officers know what he is referring to? They haven't met Rey, nor do they know her occupation or trade, not to mention she hasn't been a scavenger in over a year. How about you refer to her as Supreme Leader Snoke's Killer, or Snoke's Assassin? Anyway, we link back up with the Millennium Falcon that arrives on Discount Tatooine at a festival that occurs once every 42 years. Well, that's a shit ton of convenience right there, that they show up during this celebration, especially when this celebration is crucial to pushing the plot along, because it cannot advance on its own. But we will get to that. I think we will leave it here for part 5, and we can get stuck into Discount Tatooine in part 6. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I appreciate it. Now, if I could just borrow a minute of your time, just a couple of reminders. Firstly, again, this is the 5th part of an ongoing series, and there are links to the other videos which lead up to this one in the description. In addition to that, I have another ongoing response series called Revenge of the Prequels. There's currently 11 videos in the series. It is a rage-fueled but thoroughly argumentative response series that specifically responds to creators that exhibit poor argumentation towards the Star Wars prequels and have been for years. Check out the series if you're curious. You may find it cathartic or at the very least entertaining. And there's one more series you may enjoy, the Dumb and Dumber series. If you were as pissed off at the final season of Game of Thrones as I was, you will most certainly enjoy that series as well. And hopefully those videos should be more than enough to bridge the gap for the next video. The last bit of content I have ongoing is a weekly podcast that usually contains the dissection of various articles, videos, or a civil debate with guests regarding various pop culture topics. Would love to see you there, so keep an eye out. Before I go, a quick shout out and thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are fantastic. I appreciate all of your support towards me and my work, and I enjoy interacting with all of you. If you'd like to support this channel and my work, you can donate to the Patreon. Even if it's just $1 per month, it goes a long way in supporting creators like myself. And another special thank you to all of my YouTube members out there. If you are watching, thank you to all the Star Killers, the Captain Prices, and the Master Chiefs. I love every single one of you, and I appreciate the support. If you'd like to become a member of the channel, click the join button and see if it takes your fancy. Any and all memberships help me out a great deal as well. Now, if you'd like to contact me, you can tag me on Twitter. I'm pretty active there, or even more preferably, you can join the channel's Discord server, where other followers of this channel go to have discussions about a range of different topics, ranging from Star Wars to anime, Marvel, Lord of the Rings, video games, and several other topics as well. I highly encourage you to check it out, and who knows, maybe you'll make some friends along the way. Now, with all that said, thanks for staying till the end of the video. I appreciate it very much. You are a legend, and I'll see you next time.